You literally ran over here, didn't you?
I did.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Town of Dewey Beach public hearing and monthly town commissioner meeting with an executive session at the end. It's being held at the Dewey Beach Life Saving Station, 1 Dagworthy Avenue, Dewey Beach, Delaware, as well as virtually. Today is Friday, November 19th, and it's 4 o'clock approximately. So I'd like to convene the town commissioners meeting and start with the opening ceremonies with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. From a roll call perspective, I'll say that all of the commissioners are here. Commissioner Jasinski, Commissioner Gibbons, Commissioner Persinger, Commissioner Bauer, and Commissioner/Mayor Bill Stevens. It's good to have everyone in the same room again. And we also have Town Manager Bill Zolper and our Town Solicitor, Fred Townsend, and representing the Police Department is Billy Hocker. We also have Kate Banizak and Ashley Sander from Town Hall, as well as Jim Deedings. Packed house here today. That's the roll call. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So the agenda has been adopted. Updates, announcements. First, Del.Dot Crosswalk, a medium project. Mr. Zolper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the crosswalk markings have been completed. They were completed last week. That included the pedestrian cross marking signals, the extension of the center median lines coming out approximately 15 feet to keep cars from crossing. And then also a project behind Pfeiffer's at the corners of Cullen and Baird, where stop markings were put down and the size of the stop signs were increased by 6 inches. This was all funded through money through CTF funds with the assistance of Representative Schwartzbach.
Wonderful. I also noticed that there were trucks out here earlier today. So
they weren't supposed to be doing any Center Island walk work until Monday. They came out early today to just see how long it would take them to do a section.
Okay.
To get some timing done, because it's a 44 or 66 day project. And they want to see how long it's going to take. So they started in front of Salisbury. They're going to take the concrete all the way up to Reed. Then they'll go back and put the posts in with the ropes, and then they'll do the plantings this spring.
Wonderful. Okay. Second, establish the general fund balance policy. I'll speak and let. Do you have something, or do you want me to?
Yeah.
We're continuing the process of improving the financial statements in terms of their presentation. Unfortunately, Sheena could not be here today, but we have met this past month to go through kind of the layout in terms of how the financial statements could or should look. I've asked Commissioner Persinger to take a look at something that I prepared, and hopefully we'll have it finalized and in place for the next meeting. Okay. I've included this as an additional committee report. So I wanted from perspective of the liaisons, in case there wasn't somebody here for it, to actually give any updates concerning the various committees that may have happened in the most recent meetings. So from audit or investment, Gary, do you have any updates?
Audit just met this past week. They are in the process of beginning to look for, or to actually go through a competitive process for an auditor. I was very surprised when I was told by the chairman that we actually have to go back to the competitive process. The contract that we have with our existing auditor was a 1-year contract with 2 1-year extensions, and time really flies because we've used up both of those extensions at this point. So they're planning to have an RFP out sometime, I believe, or actually to have proposals in by mid-January and try to wrap the process up by early to mid-March.
Any update on investment?
You attended for me, sir.
Oh yeah, I'll be you today. The investment committee met last month and went through the year-to-date performance of the funds. As always, Brian Perry does a great job. I think one of the things that came out is potentially that will come back to us is a review of our current investment policy in terms of how those funds are being allocated from a risk perspective. and to see if we want to update or change how it is. Right now, to give an example, I believe that there's $1 or $2 million of our total capital that's sitting in cash, which is consistent with our policy. So just as to let everyone here know that will probably be coming up as an agenda item for the future. Budget, unfortunately, was not able to meet as there's a transfer of chair this past month from Dave Davies. Thank you so much, Dave, to Chung Yi. But there will be a meeting in the second week of December. Marketing?
Marketing just had a meeting the other night. Continuing on with the donations for the median strip, that's coming along. And then we have a project that we're looking at to do sort of like pavers. And we're working with DelDOT to see if we can do that down at the circle down there between the lighthouse and the rudder. And we'll be able to sell those, and it'll be lifetime, in memory of, or whatever, to version of doing, selling a brick. So working on doing that. So yeah, it's a great bunch on that marketing team, and they're coming up with some good ways to raise money. There's also some tourism money that may be available that we're applying for a grant on, of which we can help market Dewey Beach better. And part of the idea was, like when you go to Key West, everybody takes a picture at the southernmost point of the country, right? But in Dewey Beach, we don't really have a landmark such as that, something that we call them Instagram photos. It's in someone's background all the time. So we're looking for some ideas there, and the thought is to try to use some of the local artists to help us develop, the flavor of Dewey Beach with it. So that's what's been discussed, and more to come.
Wonderful. Charter and Code.
Unfortunately, I still do not have a chair for the Charter and Code Committee. I've been working with one of the members of the committee to try to identify somebody. I thought we had somebody identified. Unfortunately, that fell through. I did talk with another person who was interested in joining the committee, so at least I have another member. But I still have to find somebody to take on the task. We're just going to have to wrap this up by the next meeting and move on with that committee. So we'll work it out and get that committee going.
Okay. Infrastructure.
The infrastructure committee met earlier this month, and besides the small project that we'll be having a public hearing and voting on later in this meeting, they agreed to basically go through all the projects that we've been talking about that are identified in that color-coded map for basically our sewer infrastructure in town. They're going to get some new numbers for some of the things that weren't costed out, especially I think McKinley Street. And they basically agreed that they're going to come up with a prioritized list and try to kind of move forward with making recommendations for which additional sewer projects we should be doing.
Comprehensive development.
No update. They have not met.
Okay. Planning and zoning.
Maybe Fred can update us on that.
Any updates from planning and zoning?
Planning and zoning has been quite active. No. Of course, much of their agenda is driven by the recommendations that are sought from council. So they have just sent to you an agenda item, today's agenda, and they're anticipating receiving other assignments from you in the near future regarding parking issues.
Issues or opportunities?
Issues, opportunities, blessings. Might be the tone that you're going for there. I think that's about it.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the October 15, 2021 Town Commissioners meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing all, that's passed unanimously. Approval of the October 21st, 2021 Special Town Commissioner meeting minutes.
I so move.
And second?
Second. I have a couple
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
changes. In paragraph 1, after adoption agenda, paragraph 1, it's a little bit unclear toward the end of that. To get to the right place. It's about the 1, 2, 3, 4th line down, the second part of that line, and that the site plan be submitted showing that the actual parking to be provided on the applicant's property, with the provision that we understand that this referral does not constitute approval. And then I would add after that of the site plan. And then the word form in the next line should be forum. I think that was really what was meant there, which is which forum is the appropriate forum to advance a request of relief from the parking requirement. So it's fine with me with those two changes.
Nice to get that. Okay. So can we redo the motion to approve as amended by Commissioner Persinger?
Yes.
Second.
Please.
And I second it again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, with this, I'd like to open the public hearing. First, Kate, is there anyone? Well, first, I assume, why don't we go through the first topic and then see if we have somebody in the room. This is open public hearing concerning on a resolution to approve the usage of up to $27,000 from the infrastructure fund account for the Reed Avenue Stormwater Repair Project and to repair 3 outfalls on the bay side of Reed Avenue. So, Mr. Town Manager, you want to expand on that at all? Or?
So that's correct. So there's a continuing problem with the outfalls as you described there. We just did brand new lining of the pipe from basically Route 1 down to the bay. Basically, the pipe is fine. It's the outfalls that we're having issues with. We had Remington Verdict and Standard Pipe come down and give us an estimate. They came up with the estimate of $26,400. Last night, I received an additional email from Remington and Verdict saying they would like to also add approximately $6,400 on top of that. $5,900 of it is for an inspection team to be there while the project's going on, and then $500 is for travel and meals. I spoke with the infrastructure chairman this morning, and I told him basically if we had to, we could take that $6,400 and move it out and pay for it another way, either through American Rescue Act money or through some other means.
So in summary, we're not changing, obviously, the amount that we put up for public hearing. We'll find another avenue for that.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Any comments from the commissioners before we open it up? Okay. Kate, is there anyone in the waiting room?
There are, you want me to admit you have Kevin's list? Discuss the first item for the hearing.
I don't think they're here. I think they're here for
Present, not as.
Present. Yeah. present. Why not?
There's 2 others in here who I don't know what they're. They may be here for public hearing.
Well, let me just say for the second element of the public hearing, so in case that so people know what the second agenda item is, in case they're coming in to make a comment on that also. But the second element is public hearing on a draft ordinance regarding amending Chapter 185, Section 990 Utility Code of the Town of Dewey Beach, Delaware, by adding hereto a new Section 90A relating to wireless facilities and draft standard design standards. With that being said, we're pretty familiar with what that's referring to. Let's open it up to public.
Maybe for the wireless. She's here for wireless.
Mhm.
So are we going to do the infrastructure first?
We'll have them bring in all the comments, then we'll, that you don't mind, if that's okay. You tell me.
So we're going to go on both topics at the same time? I mean, it's hard because
Right.
because you don't know exactly why people are.
Well, we can.
Miriam, are you here for the infrastructure or for the draft ordinance wireless with the wireless facility ordinance?
Wireless facility ordinance.
If you don't mind, we're going to put you back in the waiting
Yep.
room so that we can discuss the first, and we'll bring you back in a few minutes.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a feeling.
Bring them in.
Bring them in. Yep. Jacob, welcome to the Town of Dewey Beach public hearing. Are you here to discuss either the ordinance or are you here as part of CTC?
CTC, it's James Crane.
Okay. We're going to put you right back. We're going to put you back into the waiting room and bring you back in. So how do you want to proceed? Do you want to go through the first?
So on the infrastructure, we don't have any
No.
public comments. So I mean, I think we need some kind of a presentation on the record from
Okay.
staff regarding this, and then we'll close the public hearing on this topic.
Okay.
And we'll then move to the next.
Okay. So.
So again, last spring, we lined the pipe, the stormwater pipe from Route 1 on Reed Street down to the Bayside. The pipe is done, the money's been paid, but at the 3 outfalls, they continue to be blocked with sand. We need to go in, spend approximately $27,000 to relieve that, put in a new system at the end of the street. And then the town needs to take on every quarter or so to coordinate and contract, probably with Rehoboth, to bring their truck in to actually blow those 3 pipes out about once a quarter.
And I assume that we have this expenditure because we have not kept up with the maintenance.
Yeah,
We didn't know about it.
Since that was done, it had no maintenance on
And how often will we have to have
it.
maintenance?
Say once a quarter.
I thought there was some conversation potentially of the county being able to do it. Is that true or not true?
Yeah,
Or
that
it's
is true.
accurate?
We spoke to the county, they're willing to help us out as well, and they did come out and try. They couldn't clean out the outfall. So that's why we're trying to get it burning.
Okay.
They're available to discuss.
Yeah, obviously this improvement would not have stopped last week's flood. But it has worked very well for others. Okay. Are there any other comments concerning the commissioners concerning this use of infrastructure funds? Okay. Not hearing any, we'll close that part of the public meeting and move on to the wireless facility. So if we can bring in Mary Ann DeBerzy. Concerning. Well, welcome back.
Hi, Marion.
And how are you?
Good.
Welcome back into the town commissioner meeting. The floor is yours.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so
Works
much.
great.
I'll state my name and my address again, as you've asked me to do before. So now my name is Mary Ann Tabrizi, and my address is 16 Dagsworthy Avenue, Unit 11 in Dewey Beach. So again, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Town managers, town commissioners, and CTC, all your work on this ordinance, complex ordinance for our little town complex issue, and I appreciate all the work here. I speak to you wearing 3 hats. I also come to the planning and zoning meeting. So just as reference, I am a Dewey Beach property owner since 2017, coming to Dewey Beach for about 20 years. In addition to that, I am the HOA president for our townhouse community, The Perch. We are 14 townhouses directly across from the life-saving station where you are. And then third, I am a member of Coastal Stewards, which is a group of concerned citizens dedicated to preserving the seascape and natural beauty of small coastal towns. And so I did attend and spoke at the planning and zoning meeting on the 22nd of October. And I recently spoke with Bill Zolper this Wednesday to share some of my comments. I have quite a number of comments, so I will comment, and at some point you want to cut me off, let me know. I can send you a draft of written comments here, so I will just jump right in. So in terms of first comment, looking at the National Environmental Policy Act, I see that that was included or is included in the checklist. Thank you for that. I don't see any clarification about wind speed, and request that that be something that be added or clarified. Typical wind speeds, I think of Verizon equipment might be 40-mile-an-hour wind speeds, and we know in Delaware we approach hurricane wind speeds and nor'easter wind speeds. So we need to be sure that any kind of equipment in our coastal town reaches and is able to withstand 140-mile-an-hour wind speeds. Second, historic review. I again don't see any mention of a historic review in the design standards. This would be in line with the National Historic Preservation Act, NHPA. So we know the life-saving station where you are is the most historical place in Dewey Beach. And again, we should be preserving and protecting that history. That life-saving station was commissioned in 1878. And so Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act states that any federal agencies or monies related to that policy need to consider the effect on historic properties. I know the life-saving station is not in the National Register of Historic Properties, but there is language that if there's a historic property that is at least 50 years old, or the site, it can be eligible and it needs to be considered when looking at wireless types of equipment. So I can send you that language. I really stress or encourage us to really be sure that we're preserving Dewey Beach history. I talked to Powell Bauer about doing some of these signs around Dewey Beach to restore our history, and that would be part of this project. I can talk to you further about that. They're historical markers. Third, the 50 feet pole allowance. In the planning and zoning meeting, there was talk of, trying to get these poles on the median and that being the focus of where we want the poles. I know Commissioner Bauer, Commissioner Cook had spoken about that. And I know our 35-foot limit is in the town, but we're allowing 50 feet. I'd like to see the clarification that the 50 feet should be designated, not on the side streets, but really in the median, if that's where the 50-foot is going to be allowed to reach over. I don't think we want to see 50-foot on side streets or closer to residences. So ask for some clarification there. Radio frequency emissions. In the planning and zoning meeting, we talked about third party, someone from a third party coming in to verify these emissions and it being at a recertification or an annual level. We stress that that is very important. Verizon can state and give us reports from their engineer, but really third party verification is critical, especially we don't know about what these emissions might or might not do. And over the next couple of years, if they do install a pole, how do we know that the emissions were the same as their applicant period of when they applied? So a third party verification, not at just application, but years after, could be critical. We have some language that we can supply in terms of writing that. We talked about best available technology, economically achievable, BATEA, in the last planning and zoning meeting. I see it was added to the design standards, but it's just listed or mentioned there. There are no examples. There's no critical, clearer language about what that means. So my concern is that we're putting that language in the design standards, but there's really no teeth to that. And we need to give examples, what does the town of Dewey Beach really mean by BATEA? Same thing with stealth technology that is listed as a definition in the ordinance, I think. Again, we list it as a definition, but nowhere else in the design standards or the ordinance do we ask that, yes, with all possible efforts, that they use equipment that is concealed, that is camouflaged, that is stealth technology to really preserve our little beach towns so we don't have these poles sticking out, where they can and cost effectively conceal, camouflage, disguise these antennas. So let's be clearer in our language. We just defined it. We don't talk about more what we mean. American Disabilities Act. We talk about ADA compliance on the sidewalks. Thank you for adding that. But what about crosswalks? If we put a pole in the median, we need to be clear that in any public walkways or public areas, the American with Disabilities Act should apply. So I think we need to broaden that, not just to the sidewalk. Residential locations or damage, injury language. So in the model ordinance that J.C. Smith had talked about or submitted to the town, we had talked about avoiding placement or small cell in close proximity to residents or sleeping quarters, living quarters to the best of our ability. And then if that is within 500 feet of a resident, to notify that residence of that installation or proposed installation, just so that they're aware that, you know, something doesn't pop up by their house. So again, these are comments from a model ordinance that we had provided to the town. And again, we can share that language. Have adequate fall to minimize any possibility of damage or injury by pole collapse or failure, ice fall, debris fall. Having language that gives this adequate fall zone. So if something was to fall off that pole, ice, any equipment, it's not going to injure anyone on the streets or in our town. I will keep going if that's okay.
Well, yeah,
You let
Mrs.
me
Berger,
know.
it's my understanding that we have just, and by the way, thank you so much
Okay.
for calling in and to, you know, caring and expressing your point of view. I think that there's one thing I think is common in the town of Dewey Beach is that where there's a consistent viewpoint of these poles and preserving the reason why we're here and what we love. It's my
Yes.
understanding that you have just recently submitted a summary of this to our town manager. Is that correct?
There are some other things that I can add, but I can submit a full, you know, more compiled list.
If you wouldn't mind, that would be wonderful.
Sure. I will do that. And thank you so much. You know, I think we have a lot of outstanding issues to address in the ordinance and design standards. And in closing, you know, I think we really need to look at this carefully. I ask you not to vote tonight so we can talk through and really identify the issues here and make this the best ordinance and design standard for our little town. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Miriam.
Katie, is there anyone other than CTC in running? Okay. So with that, I think it's okay because no one's here. I think that we can close the public hearing. Okay, so public hearing is closed. I'll open it up. Next agenda item for public comment. Is there any public comment? Not seeing any. We'll move to the first agenda item. Discuss and possibly vote to approve a resolution to approve the usage of up to $27,000 from the infrastructure fund account for the Reed Avenue Stormwater Repair Project to repair 3 outfalls or the Bayside of Reed Avenue.
Motion.
Motion? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved.
Mr. Mayor, we do have folks from Remington and Verdict on. Can we
We
release
can
them now?
release
Or should
them.
we?
Yeah, I think we're, go ahead.
No, it's just the way, when we go through the process, could you stop, pause for a minute and ask for discussion?
I will. I apologize.
Sorry.
You're absolutely right. I know. I know that and I apologize.
I didn't have anything, but.
Duly noted. Thank you, Commissioner. Second item, agenda item, discuss.
So we had a motion and a second.
Correct.
And did we have
Yeah.
a voice vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and everyone
All right.
unanimously.
All right, thanks.
Discuss and possibly vote to approve a draft ordinance regarding amending chapter 185, section 90, Utilities Code of the Town of Dewey Beach, Delaware, by adding thereto a new section 90A relating to wireless facilities and draft design standards. Obviously, I'd like to open this up for discussion. Or do we have to?
Either way, I just want a period of discussion.
Well,
Yeah, I have comments on.
Let's open up for discussion before we.
Yeah, I think what Miriam expressed is very valid stuff that we should consider. And I probably need some legal help here too. I mean, we need to put some ordinances in place to help protect us. And I don't want to kick the can down the road another 30 days while we wait to add these things. So are we able to pass what we have and then tighten up through an amendment to this ordinance? And maybe we can schedule that 2 weeks from now or something, or
So
7 days from now. 8
So
days.
that's a good question. So we do have currently in force this section 90A regarding wireless facilities. We are here reconsidering that ordinance after receiving recommendations from CTC for how to improve it.
Okay.
And those recommendations are evident in the ordinance by the language that's highlighted. And I'm not referring to the design standards yet, but those changes are before you. I think a considerable number of the comments I heard from it was Mary Tabrizi, may have related to the design standards more so than the ordinance. But your sentiment is correct that we can improve the ordinance today. We have an ordinance in place. We can improve it today by passing
Right. So
this
doing in
ordinance.
steps as opposed to.
and
trying to
you
get it
don't
all.
have to stop considering how to make improvements just because you passed the ordinance. You didn't do that before.
Right.
You passed an ordinance and now you're revisiting it, and you can revisit this second time.
I'm wondering, is there anything that Miriam had expressed, and I don't know, and this is for discussion for all of us, did Miriam or Jeffrey Smith express anything that if we pass the ordinance today, we're hindering some of these other things that we should have done? So I don't know the answer to that.
Go ahead.
So there are two items that she brought to my attention. One is the ADA compliance with the sidewalk. She would like that to change to say ADA compliance with walkways. And the other one was on page 5 under small cell facilities, number 1, it would read town's height restriction of 35 feet unless the wireless company can provide or prove that the 35 feet is not sufficient. All other, this is the big part, all other location options have been exhausted. So basically what she and some other public comment, I talked to Mr. Dedes about this, is that the only way we go above 35 feet is that everything else has been exhausted. That wasn't in there, so that language in all other location options have been exhausted. She wanted that added in there. So those are the only two that I'm familiar with.
All right. I mean, I would be inclined to add those two things, through a motion to add those two things in there, because I think they're both very valid.
If I could ask, did we get the CCC folks added back into
Right, yeah.
the thing? Oh, I just didn't see him, so I didn't know if they were there. If he was able to be seen or heard or whatever. I think there was a lot of good stuff Miriam brought up. I think that we need to have tighter language, as our town manager and Miriam were talking about, with the 50 feet versus 35 feet. But we also need to keep in mind that they need to be able to get a signal to where they're kind of going. And my sense from the public comment is people would rather have a 50-foot tall tower in the median than a 35-foot pole in front of their house on a side street.
Mhm.
And so I want us to kind of think about the language, and my concern with your language is that might say, well, if it's going to be 35 feet, they're going to put it on the side street rather than doing 50 feet on the median. And I don't want them necessarily to go. My personal view is I don't think that's what the public necessarily wants. I think they'd rather have it on the median at 50 than 35 feet on a side street.
Mhm.
As far as staging the updates to it, I think, we've kind of been in, for lack of a better word, a little bit of a back and forth with these wireless communications providers. And I think that they want not a level of permanent certainty, but probably a level of, okay, these are the regs that I'm going to have to work under. And I'd like us, for whatever we do, to kind of pass it, not with the intention of 30 days later changing it again. I just think that they kind of want to know, okay, this is the regs. I'm going to have to kind of figure out what my proposal comes under. So those are my initial comments. Let me see about anything else she said. Oh, the third-party verification of RF emissions after the fact. I don't know if our CTC consultant knows what we're allowed to do under the law. Is that something that we're allowed to do?
Yes, if the town wants to do that, you can.
Okay, in your professional opinion, do the RF emissions frequently deviate significantly in terms of being over what they say they are after install, like a year or two?
Not that Go ahead, Sean.
So let me just mention one thing that, just to be clear, our firm is not, we're not attorneys and we're not licensed in the state of Delaware to give you legal advice. So I think the first question was a legal one. You're allowed to make the rules that you want to make. It's possible that the industry would come back and say that the costs to do so effectively prohibit us to deploy. So this is something that I think that you would take to your counsel. But certainly, just having them be required to provide this evidence that they're in compliance in and of itself is not an issue.
Okay, well, but going back to my point on the technical question, yeah.
Yeah, the second question, and James, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here. In our experience, so first of all, I think in the design guidelines, we asked them to submit a EME report. And so this is more or less a prediction of what they think the emissions are going to be. And these are based on what they're supposed to be is worst case scenario. So this would be like, the signal reflects off the ground and it comes back to you. So you kind of get hit twice by it, et cetera. In our experience, the tests that are taken after deployment are typically much lower than what the predicted worst case values are in general.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right, is that?
Yeah, for right now. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Person.
Yeah, I had some similar thoughts to Commissioner Bauer that there were some good comments that the commenter made. And I guess I'm wondering about the trade-off of passing something now and then coming back and tweaking it, or waiting a couple of weeks and taking full advantage of the comments that we have and then coming back and doing this all at once. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Jasinski. At some point, the communications vendors are going to say, you got a moving target out there. You guys keep moving the goalposts, and we're not really sure how we get there. And I don't think we want to get into that situation. So and the other question I have is, I don't know if we were to wait, say, 2 weeks to pass this again, would we be holding the town up in some way from moving forward with some of the things that they want to pursue with this revised ordinance under their belt? And I don't know the answer to that question. But I mean,
Can we open that up to the town manager to reply?
So I think the quicker we get this done, the better, but we need to have it done right. So, I mean, I think those are some good points. I passed the points up from Marion that she commented on to CTC on Wednesday night. I copied her on, so CTC does have those. I wanted those to be reviewed by our experts, our consultants, to see how practical some of those are. For example, the 50 feet. And correct me if I'm wrong, folks from CTC, if the federal law says they can go up to 50 feet, if we pass an ordinance saying 35, can they still go above that?
They have to show. They have to show the reason why they need to go up to 50 feet. If you pass that ordinance, you're allowed to pass a particular ordinance based on whatever standards you have for your town. You can't outright prohibit the wireless siting or the telecommunications facility. If they need to go up to 50 feet, which is allowed to be put into your right of way, and that's where the federal definition comes into that. In order to go into the right of way, the federal government and the FCC defines that height as 50 feet.
And that's why I put that language in there. All other location options have been exhausted if we're going to go above 35 feet.
Yeah, absolutely. One way to look at it is the U.S. Code prohibits a jurisdiction from outright prohibiting any type of wireless siting, whether it's a macro or a small cell. But at the same time, the U.S. Code does not prohibit you, the jurisdiction, from enforcing your own standards.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Well, not sure we have the answer to the question. I mean, is 2 weeks, a critical period of time if we were to decide to wait on that, or 3 weeks or whatever?
I don't think 2 weeks is. I think anything beyond that, we get closer to Christmas. I'd like to have something wrapped up before December 15th. We have our next meeting on the 17th, sometime in that first week of December, maybe second week of December, but we do need to move on this so we can start working with the wireless companies as they come in with the proposals.
So if I could offer something, if we're going to, I guess, table this meeting, and Fred, you'll kind of tell us how to do it. I'd like us to give some direction to our town attorney and our town manager for which things we want changed and language put together for, and what direction we want that language to be, rather than just having kind of a table of issues and them kind of coming back to us with something. I think I'd like us to kind of say, okay, this is the direction we want you to go. Give us a revised document at the next meeting, or an amended document at the next meeting, where we bring this back up again and get it finalized and voted on.
I just want to make one comment. I'll turn it back to you, Gary. For those that, that are listening to this or watching this, there are structures in our town that are above 35 feet. So it's not like there aren't any. The high power lines on the west side of Highway 1, Route 1, are in excess of 35 feet, probably closer to 50, as are the light poles in the median. So just so everyone knows that there are already facilities or placements that are above that 35 feet. From this conversation, can support as we discuss how we want to move forward, but as our solicitor had commented, we already have a resolution in place, and what we're trying to do is improve it. And I understand to the point of, and I'll support it, obviously, if the idea right now is to give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just so that we have a definitive answer and not continually changing the rule book. I think we can all get it. If that's how the commissioners feel, I think we can move for that.
Yeah, we just have to schedule an in-between meeting.
I'm so fine with an in-between meeting too.
So do we want to go through the various areas that might need to be changed and just kind of talk about the consensus, so our town attorney will know?
Sure,
how to
I think it's a great
modify
use of time.
That's hard to do because I haven't seen the comments that we got from the commenter. I'd really like to see those. I know that they've been sent to CTC for them to review, and they're going to have kind of not the final word, but they'll have the expert opinion on each of those. But I'd like to see those as well. There was a model ordinance that was mentioned as a possibility that we should look at. This notion of best available technology, economically achievable. I think it says feasible in the design standards, so it's kind of the same thing. I had the same reaction the commenter had, that it really doesn't mean anything unless we have a definition for it. So I sat down to try to find a definition. And it seems to be, at least if you Google it, you get lots of applications to environmental standards and EPA issues, but nothing with respect to telecommunications. So, I mean, I could have made up a definition, but I don't think that would do us much good. It would be good if we could get a definition. Perhaps CTC could offer us a definition about that. But again, it's a little hard to go over all the issues. We don't have all of the input at this point.
And if I could add to that comment that you just made, that the attempt to add that concept into the ordinance came after the initial cut that CTC suggested. So it was Planning Commission that said, let's introduce, they were persuaded to think that we should introduce this concept, but just expressing the fact that there is such a thing without requiring it anywhere in the ordinance is suboptimal.
To Commissioner Persinger's point, I haven't seen everything either. I mean, but they're just in Mr. Breezy's comments, she talked about historic preservation. She talked about residential notification. And I guess my concern is if we leave this meeting today without discussing whether we want to require some of those things, then we'll come into the next one not really knowing how the ordinance needs to be written. And that's kind of the point I'm making is I'm afraid that we won't get it done next time if we leave this meeting without deciding if some of these things that we want to do or not do, because we won't have an ordinance that either reflects them or doesn't reflect them.
Well, I have a suggestion.
Go ahead.
Like if we pick the date in the future, I'm just using December 2nd as a pulling it out of the air. Let's say that's our target date to have a discussion on this item again to approve this one ordinance. What kind of timeline can we get from CTC to integrate some of those suggestions to see what's workable, what's non-workable, and get it to us so we can look at it sometime, hopefully at least 4 or 5 days before that. Is that reasonable? The CTC, I mean, is there something that we could get back from you by the end of next week?
That's called Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, I believe so. Sean, that should fit in, right?
We can absolutely give you some candidate language. I agree that typically, especially around notifications, there tends to be a little bit of back and forth. So if you're leaning towards notifying, we can give you a certain radius of people to be notified. We can also advise on what types of applications that would need the notification. So for instance, if they're just simply modifying an existing site, do they need to be notified, or are these just, new sites? But we can certainly put that candidate language in there in that timeframe.
All right, hearing that, are the commissioners in agreement that we can get back together on the second, roughly or approximately the 2nd of December? And if so, town manager, can you send whatever you have received to all the commissioners so that they can review it also? And hopefully we can finalize this.
Yeah, I have the list from Marion,
Yes.
and then I have the list that I also
Okay.
sent Marion to CTC. I'll send that to everybody tonight.
Oh, good.
And could we provide comments on those materials and send those back to
Yeah.
the town manager? He can send
I think
them,
that'd be
forward
great.
them to CTC as appropriate for consideration if necessary.
I think great idea.
So is the approach then that you're going to send us everything, we'll individually, not collectively, give you comments, and then you'll make some decisions about giving direction as far as how the ordinance and the design standards should be written to conform to that? Is that?
Sound good?
Yeah, I'll have to discuss it with Jim and Dawn and our CTC reps.
Right. Because my point is we won't have a chance to discuss it collectively, obviously, if we take that approach.
Good.
Okay.
All right. With that, we're going to close that we're going to basically table that agenda item and we'll schedule a meeting.
We'll motion the table.
Motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we can, can you check your calendars to see if that December 2nd?
Yeah, that's a Thursday night.
Yeah, if I'm doing the second, it's going to be remote for me. Just
Okay.
fine.
And for me as well.
But everyone else is good?
Yeah.
All right,
I'd be remote.
go ahead.
Yeah, we don't need a quorum. Physically. We still do for the town commissioners.
So wait a minute. So you said regularly scheduled meetings was your 3-person rule. Not to say that was your rule, because we all voted to agree to it, but yeah.
Well, there's certainly nothing that would violate the state requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, under the Emergency Act, that was.
Right,
Okay.
Right.
regularly scheduled meetings. Okay,
I would,
so,
at this point, I am already scheduled with patients until 6 o'clock on that day, but I will come here if we meet in person, after that. I know that's late. Or I can't even do remotely. I just checked
On the 2nd.
on the 2nd.
until after 6.
Mhm.
I'm okay with that. Is
I can do 6. Just got to drive.
that okay?
Yeah, 6 o'clock is fine for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So December 2nd at 6 o'clock, we'll have a special town commissioner meeting to discuss the draft ordinance that we on the wireless facility. Again, Bill, you're going to send the documents. We've already discussed it on fine. Okay. All right. Agenda item number 3, discuss and possibly vote to approve the personnel policy manual. Hi. Please go to the microphone. Welcome Diane Campanelli from who was our HR consultant, who's helped us with the policy manual. Just you can give us some background
Absolutely.
and open up for the commissioners for any questions.
Okay. So my name is Diane Campanelli. Graduated from Westchester University, the Wharton School of Business, currently in Tulane Law School. I worked for the Lions Companies Insurance Agency up until August 1st of this year. I started my own agency and now Lions is my client. So I still have them. I also, IG Burton's my client. was gonna say Dewey Beach. Dewey Beach is my client, Rehoboth Beach Country Club. So I've been working the majority of my HR years in the state of Delaware, though I live in the state of Pennsylvania. Any questions for me? Most people know David Lyons, so I work for David.
No, I'll open up to the commissioners. I assume that everyone's reviewed. Diana, you don't have to stand up there if you don't want to, but if there's an issue that would need her expertise, I'd throw it out there for commissioners to act on too. David?
No, I mean, it's been circulated multiple times and, I've gone through it, so.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
The only question I have was, did we resolve the issue of the 12-month period for the Family Medical Leave Act? Is that from that?
Sure. You gave us 4 different choices from the Department of Labor. You're absolutely correct. Those are the 4 choices. So the wording that I chose for the employee handbook was in fact supporting option number 3. The reason that I added to it and additional notification or future notification is because of this reason. Being an HR practitioner for many years, I don't even need to go to it. Many years, it is normally what happens is somebody says, okay, I need FMLA to have a baby. Okay, they go out and they have their baby, they return after 6 weeks. So they have additional 6 weeks left in that calendar year to have another child, to take care of a family member, to take care of themselves under FMLA. So then they put in a request for serious health condition. And now that's a first request for a serious health condition. And then they maybe 2-3 weeks later have another first request for something else. So the reason that I add an additional notifications is because yes, it is going forward from the date of the first request, but it's also reflecting back. So it's not just about it starts on May 1st. It's also as of September 1st, what was taken between September 1st and May 1st. So it's kind of semantics. I agree with you, option number 3, and that's the intended, how it's written, that it's how it's intended to be written is from the date of the first notification and any subsequent notifications following that time period, so that I can account for other FMLA requests that are first child, first take care of my family member, first personal illness. Make sense?
I'm not sure I follow all of that, honestly.
That's okay. Under FMLA,
I
you
mean,
get
the
12
number
total
is
weeks.
obviously option number 3 seems simple to me. It's just when you first take leave, your 12-month period begins
Which
at that
leave?
point.
When I
The
first take
FMLA
which
leave.
leave?
The FMLA leave.
Right. And what I have back from employees from clients' locations is that was my first request for having a baby. This is my
Okay.
first request because I'm sick. This is my first request because I want to take care of my parent.
Right.
It is our first request and then subsequent notifications in order for me to be able to go back and count all that time frame. So it's just semantics, but
Because there's
Okay, but is
multiple
that clear?
instances.
Is that clear in the, I mean, has anything been changed in the manual itself?
the manual itself reads, Bill, can
I
you?
mean, the employee has to read it and understand. So,
Well, no, the employee has to read it as a set of guidelines and then
Mhm.
see Sheena. So that
Correct, yeah.
Sheena, they have access to me. Most of them have my number. I've actually stood in this room many and many a time talking to all the lifeguards, but so no, our job with an employee manual is to provide a set of guidelines for an employee to go ahead and follow and then ask their supervisor or then ask human resources for specifics related to that. So we want this handbook to be a good set of guidelines, certainly for people, but when it comes to specifics about things like a leave policy, we want them to ask questions. We want to be notified. We want to have a conversation.
yeah, again, I understand. Maybe I'm being dense about this, but it still seems simple to me if you start counting. Whether you're taking it to have a baby or taking it to care for a sick family member, it still all counts toward the same thing.
You would
still
think.
get 12 weeks.
Correct. You would
And during
think.
a 12-month period. So that's what the regulations say. And that's how it's written for military.
You would think, but remember, when it comes to FMLA, it's the employees who come back and they really want as much time as they can possibly take. So my experience has been to be able to put in first response and any subsequent notifications so that those subsequent notifications, I can say to an employee, it's true that that was the first time you did it to have a baby. It's true. It was the first time you took it because you were sick. It's true. It was the first time you did it so that, you could care for your loved one. But in culmination, we start from your first request backwards 12 months. That's the only reason it's written, and subsequent notification.
So you're saying that in any 12-month period, rolling 12 months, whether you're looking back or looking forward, you can not have more than 12 weeks.
Correct.
Well, that's not option 3, that's option 4.
It's semantics, trust me.
Well, it's not, the regulation is written very clearly. And
It
it's
is.
very clearly stated in the employee manual for military. And all I'm saying is, let's state it just as clearly for regular FMLA. This is not, it shouldn't be a matter of semantics. I mean, it should be understandable.
Here's my last statement would be, is I do it for subsequent notification for the same reasons I've explained here. I have no problem with saying number 3 from the DOL, we'll put it in there word for word. Can I add and subsequent notification following that?
I don't know what that means.
I can live with that.
I mean, I don't know what that means.
Let me ask you one, is this the only open issue that we have?
It's
From
the
a
only one
commissioner's
I've had.
perspective.
It's for quite a
I
while.
don't
think-
have any issues.
Okay, so Gary, do you have is there a suggested change to the wording on that paragraph?
Yeah, which is very simple, that the
Commissioner Person, apologies.
12-month period is determined based on the first date an employee takes FMLA leave. That was my suggestion for a substitution for the sentence that said the 12-month period is determined based on the date of first request and subsequent notification. That sentence doesn't have meaning for me, and I don't think I'll have meaning for an employee.
And Ms. Campanelli is saying that is ambiguous to the extent that an employee might think that the first notification they give is tied to the justification they use, and that they can use another justification later on, and it won't count that time that they use for taking care of a family member versus taking care or having a baby. They won't coincide. They think they get another 12. That's what her clarification is attempting to do.
Okay, I mean, I think that's something that would be worked out with the employee. I feel a lot more comfortable sticking with the language that's in the regulations and in the employer guide that's from the Department of Labor for specifying this. But, if others disagree, that's, we can go ahead.
If you're trying to make it simple for the employees to understand, can you just put a sentence in there that says an employee is only entitled to a total of 12 weeks for all reasons
Over a
defined
12-month period.
Over a 12-month period? Is that something that could be put in there?
Sure.
If that
That would be certainly be clear, yes.
Okay.
That would be simple.
All right.
Okay, so I'm
Very good.
going to motion that we approve this, adding a sentence to the basic FMLA leave entitlement that says each employee is only entitled up to a total of 12 months of
12 weeks.
FMLA
12
leave.
weeks.
12 weeks of FMLA leave in any 12-month period.
12 period.
Works for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Is
All
there
right, is that the
I will
motion?
some more
second that.
discussion?
Saying weeks.
Is there a second for that?
I did already.
Second?
Yes, I did.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Sorry.
just making sure. Just making sure.
Sorry.
Just make sure the train doesn't go too fast.
No.
All right. That was unanimously approved.
You got that language?
All right.
So page 22
No.
gets us.
Right.
Got it.
Already talked about Kyle. Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
Diane.
Thank you.
Long process.
Number 4, discuss and possibly vote to create a climate change committee. For those of us on the council, we obviously have been discussing this for quite some time. We know that there's climate change and sea level rising, and it's going to be an issue, especially as we are a coastal town with the bay to our west. And I think it's that. And former Mayor Cook had asked that this be a priority that we discuss and move forward. So it was put out there to possibly have the creation of a new committee in addition. And Commissioner Persiger also drafted a focus and objective statement. So I'll open up for the commissioners to discuss.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Okay.
Was there
I like what Gary put
focus-
together.
Focus was
There-
develop
there
recommendations. Why don't you go ahead? Why don't you?
It's,
Gary.
it's titled Climate Change and Sea Level Rise Committee. The focus is develop recommendations to the town council for a responsible strategy for resilience to climate change and rising sea levels to protect the town in the face of rising sea levels. And then there's several objectives. The first one is promote public understanding of flood zone designations and associated flood risks. Assess and recommend tools available to characterize current future flood risks. Propose town coastal adaptation goals, and in parentheses, protection, accommodation, retreat, or preservation, and how these goals may apply differentially to sections of the town. Consider possible changes to zoning and building regulations that may enhance resilience to the effects of climate change and sea level rise. And finally, identify sources for possible grant funding and technical assistance for implementing resilience and sustainability strategies. So, this comes directly out of the comprehensive development plan. There's a section on page 77 of the comp plan that talks about many of these issues. And in fact, the objective is to establish a responsible strategy for resilience to rising sea levels that will protect the town in the face of a rise in sea level. I think it's important also to point out that, this is not intended to take anything away from the infrastructure committee. I think, the infrastructure committee has a very well-defined role, and they have a role in determining how we spend the money for specific projects. But I think this is a much more future-looking kind of group. Over what time horizon do we want to consider this? Are we looking over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and try to see what the impacts are going to be? And what do we as a town want to do to be in a better position to avoid some of the negative effects of rising sea level and climate change? We just had a couple of weeks ago, we saw some of the effects that can happen, and we certainly want to be able to mitigate those negative effects as much as possible. What should property owners be able to do in order to elevate their property to be able to avoid some of those negative risks? I think it's important just for people to better understand what the flood risks are, what flood designations really mean. And there are probably only two people in the room who understand fully what flood designations are, and that's Dawn and Jim. And what the building requirements are, that if you're going to build a new property or you're going to make some changes to the property, what are the things that you have to do right now? But there may be some additional things that we may want to recommend, not the least of which is simply increasing the amount of freeboard. Because if you're in a flood zone, your height measurement, you have to start from base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. I've seen recommendations that should be 2 feet or even 3 feet. And if we do that, if we allow property owners to move up existing property or raise existing property, what does that do to our height limitations? We're willing to give some leeway there. So there are a lot of issues to discuss. I think it's important to, we do have somebody who's volunteered, Dave Davis, who's chairs the Comprehensive Development Plan Committee, has agreed to chair this group. I think it should be a separate committee. There was some discussion about making that a subcommittee of the Comprehensive Development Plan Committee, but I think this needs broad-based representation within the town, and getting people from the Infrastructure Committee certainly would be important to have as part of that group. So I'm very much in favor of this. I'd like to see this move forward, and I hope other commissioners will see that as well.
Commissioner Gibbons, you have any comments? None? Process, where Fred, us approving this committee, is this also time that we would, do we need to identify a commissioner liaison at this point in time? Or
I don't think that you need to, but you certainly could if you're ready to do that.
open for conversation? Is there an individual who would like to be a liaison to this newly formed committee, if it's motion to approve?
I mean, I'll always volunteer. I do have my lot already.
You do.
But I mean, it fits well together with the Comprehensive Development Plan Committee. But even if somebody else takes over as liaison, I'm going to be very involved just because it's an important issue.
I'll nominate Garrett for
Well,
that committee.
I think the first thing is we need a motion to create a climate change committee, and
I second the motion to create a climate change committee.
all
You
in
would,
favor.
yeah, you would be the first person making the motion.
Well, he did. Paul,
Did you vote?
excuse me, Commissioner Bauer did.
Oh, okay, all right.
Everybody wants a second in this one.
All right.
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor.
Aye.
So the Climate Change Committee has been duly formed as a new committee in the town of Dewey Beach. And we'll ask at this time Commissioner Persinger to act as liaison. I don't know if that, again, if it needs to be a formal, but and if there are other committees, Commissioner Persinger, that, I realize you have a lot on your plate. If there ever becomes an imbalance, just let us know.
Right.
Okay. That's wonderful. Item number 5, discuss town hall and police department facilities, space requirements, and possibly vote to approve creating a working group to further discuss this topic. I'll ask Commissioner Jazinski to.
Yes,
Start
I
the
brought this
conversation.
up at the last meeting, and I know we've already approved some funding for the town to hire an architect. And I was giving some thought about it. I said, we really got to figure out what the wants and needs are of this. Needs coming before wants, and people sometimes not being able to distinguish, what you really need versus what you want. And we really don't even have a budget, in mind at this point. But I think in order for us to set a budget, really understand what it is, we've got to understand what we have to have and what we'd like to have, right? In this whole thing. So at first I was thinking a committee, and I kind of thought about it. I said, well, this is really more of an informal process. And a committee kind of does something and takes a vote and makes a recommendation based on a vote. And I'm thinking that this group is really just more going to be shaping what we're going to do so that an architect would be able to kind of take that and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. So I looked through the different types of things that we can kind of spin off, Fred, and working group seemed like it was the best fit. Is that kind of would that be your kind of agreement if it's really going to be meeting publicly, but informally, and just kind of discussing things and trying to document what the needs are? Is that
So if it's working on items of public business,
Right.
which it will be,
Right.
it will be subjected to the Freedom of Information Act,
right?
of course. But I don't have strong feelings about the label you
Okay.
assign to it.
Okay.
It's just recognize that the Freedom of Information Act applies to it.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So really the only question is we're going to, vote and put this in place. So when you have a working group, do you have to kind of name a chair, or do you just kind of leave it open to who's in it, or do we name people? I'm just not really sure what the process we're supposed to use if we do some type of working group to do this. I want the public to be involved, and I don't want anyone to feel like this is being done in a black box,
I think the transparency is key, but I fear that having too many people in the room, we're not going to get it done efficiently.
Right.
And I think that we have a timeline in terms of the code enforcement building is in really bad shape. And fortunately, for the first time, I went through the police department last week and saw kind of the conditions that you're dealing with. So I'm all for, like, with commissioners or commissioners plus, knowing that we have to bring it out to the public. But so
Okay. So why don't I just make a motion that we establish a working group. I'll keep all the commissioners as well as the police department and the town manager involved. We'll set up a meeting. We'll kind of discuss what the program is in terms of like what our objectives are, and we'll set it, and we'll kind of take it from there. But we'll be doing this as a working group, informal process, but it will be public. Okay.
any problems with that motion? Keep the train. Okay.
Second.
We have a second. All right, all in favor? Oh,
I just want to make a comment.
sure.
This puts, I think, a damper on the town manager. First identified one town and the police department, various departments. And I would just suggest that we at least establish the architect where we want to go, what our parameters are, then open it up for work. Make recommendations. And the reason I say that is this is going to add another level of, not in a bad way, but almost another level of bureaucracy to help us come up with something.
Maybe it's not clear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, for instance, we need as a group to think about for, say, the new town hall, are we going to basically duplicate the type of space we have here, which would be a significant consumption of space? How many private offices do we need? How many shared spaces do we need for, the police? What do we need with dispatch facilities, chief of police facilities, incarceration, for lack of a better word? Do we want to do something in that area? And I think that we need to have discussions around what we'd like to have and what we absolutely need to have in it. Because, at this point, I know everyone says we need a new town hall, we need a new code enforcement, we need a new police station, but we haven't really defined how much space is needed and how the spaces are going to be used. And that's kind of what I'm getting at.
So,
I agree with everything that you said.
Mhm.
I think this is something there. Architect, your town manager. Discussion ahead of time and work with somebody, throw it into a working. group. They're gonna rely on the police department to come back and say, this is what we need. I think we ought to come up at least with some sort of concept and then run it by. the working group.
That makes sense to me from a standpoint of, because I think it should come from the, the people that need it most. People are going to work in it. They develop what their needs are. And then
Yeah.
once this is formulated, then the working group gets involved in it to say, hey, did you think about this? Maybe,
My thought process was the working group includes the town manager, the key department heads, the police, the commission, at least a subset of the commissioners, right? All having these discussions rather than kind of being going off and doing it and coming back, to us with this is what we want or this is what we need. But if you guys don't support it, then I guess we'll just do it the way you guys.
Well,
we support this in the order that goes,
yeah.
right?
I think so in addition, you're obviously having the conversation, this is important, it's important change for the future town of Dewey Beach. In executive session, we do have a conversation that if you look at the first item pursuant to section 29, Del C1004B2, the town commissioners will be meeting in executive session to have preliminary discussions on site acquisition for any publicly funded capital improvements or sale lease for real property. That conversation will include some elements that I think that we may want to just table or hold off on a conversation around a working group until we have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, my thought process is until we've done some of that stuff, it's really just about how much space and how it's going to be used. There's no design element to it, right?
The thing is, I think all of the commissioners as well as the representative of the town want to be part of this process.
Right.
And I think the question is, in addition to that, who's going to be part of that working group? Because I think it's going to be an important process. It's going to be important potential use of town funds. So I'd ask that we table, if it's possible that we table this and as knowing that this is an important agenda item. So for the town, for the commissioners themselves. But I believe we've already had a motion in a second.
No, we have a motion, no second,
Okay.
I don't think.
So then the motion fails and then we agree to.
I don't know whether it was seconded or what. But
You were in the midst of making a motion when we had a discussion and you didn't get to finish your motion.
I thought Commissioner Barrow seconded.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
I withdraw my second.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna table this agenda item.
Can I just say from the police department and from the town manager and everybody works, we are very excited and appreciate the support to move forward with this. So thank you.
Okay. Motion to table.
Second.
Who's the?
Oh, I should motion to table, not you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the way it works?
Yes. I request the motion.
table.
I'll second.
And all in favor to table item number 5?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pass unanimously. Number 6, discuss chapter 185 zoning parking requirements, possibly refer to planning and zoning to provide recommendations of A, residential parking requirements and B, resort business 2 parking requirements. Let's focus on A first. Could we get some background on this motion or on this agenda item?
I can, I guess.
Yeah.
A is pretty straightforward. We've known about this for years, but for residential parking requirements in terms of the number of bedrooms, what's written in table 2 is inconsistent with what's written in the code. It's been referred to P&Z before, but it's never actually gotten done. We need to refer it to them, and in they don't need to do a separate meeting on it, but in one of their next public hearings, they should public hearing on this, go through the process, and make a determination with public comment about is table 2 driving it, or is the text driving it? And just for reference points, so everyone understands, the town's practice over the years has always been to have table 2 drive the requirement for the residential parking.
It's probably the case that the table or the text was amended at one point without regard to the other language. And while we could go to a lot of trouble to determine which was the most recent change to the code, because the table is part of the code, it's really in the council's hands to determine how the code should be applied. So it makes sense that you would take another look at this. It also, I think, over time had been determined that it was unfair that we would impose against a property owner a standard that was more burdensome than another standard that appears in the code. So here we are.
Hearing that, what are the next steps?
Well, are we going to do 2 separate votes for A and B, or 1 vote for each one?
I think we do both. I'll motion to. send
Well,
both.
what you send to the planning commission with regard to B may require some deliberation. So I think you should send them as separate agenda items.
Okay, so I motion that we send to the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at Chapter 185 and provide consistency for residential parking between what's written in Table 2 and the text of the code.
Second.
From a discussion perspective, is it specific to A1 on the
Yes.
code? Okay, I just want to make sure that or are you asking them to review
I'm asking them to
185,
review,
35,
no, 185 specific to residential parking requirements.
which is 185, 35, A1?
I don't have the numbers sitting in front of me, but
Okay.
okay.
All right, and we have a second
Second.
discussion? All right, not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously and let's move on to 6B, and that's discussing Chapter 185 zoning parking requirements and possibly refer to planning and zoning resort business -2 parking requirements. And so again, Commissioner Jazinski, can you?
Yeah, so, as, things have kind of happened, we've had parking for restaurant requirements in the code for some time. There's been discussion that they're outdated. And there's also been discussion that specifically in the RB2 district, the property parcels aren't that large. And so if people start to become requiring parking under the existing parking requirements, it becomes somewhat untenable to do restaurant projects the way they're written if the restaurant's going to exceed 2,000 square feet. Additionally, the current restaurant code has a cliff where it's the way it's interpreted, at least by the town, it's 0, 0, 0, 0. If your building gets bigger, and then all of a sudden you hit this point, you need 10 spots, right? And then it goes up from there. So I think it makes sense to have this revisited. I think it's very important that we get some robust public comment on it. I have a idea of a proposal for an ordinance change that we could refer to them, but I'm going to defer to Fred on whether we should actually defer a specific ordinance change or whether we should just ask them to look at it.
Well, that's a policy question, and we've referred matters to them. Like, for instance, the matter we just referred to them. We're saying we said make it consistent, but we didn't tell them which direction that you were going in. There have been other occasions when this group's been very specific, saying we want you to consider recommending to us a code amendment, but we don't particularly want you to hear back from you that you want something related. So you have given them stricter guidelines or a narrower focus. So it's up to you. Ultimately, if you send something to them, you can get whatever their recommendation is. It could be completely different from what you've announced you'd like to consider. I don't think, as long as they're within the topic, I don't think I would advise them that they can't do that. If I'm advising them at the planning commission level, I might say that, keep in mind that council's already expressed that they don't think this is a path they want to go down. But that's the risk of sending something to the planning commission. And
so let me let me offer this. I'm going to tell you what my suggestion is, and then we can have some discussion about whether you guys think it's a good suggestion for a place to start. So I explained to you how it's done right now. You basically don't need anything for restaurants up to 20,000 square feet, and then over 20,000 square feet.
2,000.
2,000, not 20.
And you get 12 months off too.
And it's patron space. Correct, correct. And then you start needing per 200 square feet, you need one starting at that, at the 2,000 square feet of patron space. So a proposed language for 185-35-6A, which is the section that has it, would be all zoning districts except for the PRB1 and PRB3 zoning districts. Restaurants with 4,000 square feet or less assigned for patron use shall have no off-street parking requirements. Restaurants with more than 4,000 square feet assigned for patron use shall have one space for each 200 square feet assigned for patron use over 4,000 square feet, rounded up, including open decking.
Well, I'll open up the commissioners for discussion. Commissioner Persinger.
So your proposal would be interpreted in a way that it's different than interpretation of the current view, right? So that once you reach 4,000 square feet, you would only, anything over that would require just one parking space, as opposed to including that first 4,000 square feet. That's certainly fine for them to consider. I mean, I think whether it's explicit or not, there's already another proposal on the table, because I think that has been publicly disseminated. This was the proposal from Mr. Mandelis, and that has a different threshold of 10,000 square feet, and that's total square footage. So I would like to see this referred to planning and zoning with a couple of options, your option clearly being one of them.
Right.
Mr. Mandelis' option, I would think, would be considered as well. But I don't think we should put any constraints necessarily on what they consider. I would like to have them have a full discussion of what the possibilities are.
But specifically with an RB2.
Within RB2, yes,
Right.
yes.
Commissioner Gibbons, you have any comment?
I really think this needs to have a robust public comment, as you said. And I think this will provide the opportunity for that to occur. I like the idea of giving a couple of options as ways to go. So it's not just look at parking, but look at these some ways we think it could be changed. And we look forward to your feedback. So I would support.
Yeah, I know one thing I'd add to it, just from a guideline standpoint, and I think what Glenn Mandelis was talking about is the consistency of, like Rehoboth, I think is 5,000 square foot of patron space, and Bethany's 5,000, and we're 2,000 before we start requiring parking. So should we be under where Bethany, I mean, maybe some language along the lines of, review the consistencies of the neighboring coastal towns to be close to them. I mean, we don't have to be we don't have to be above them or below them. Maybe we need to be right where they're at as well. And I think that's what I'd personally like to see them consider, just as long as we stay as competitive, because we want restaurants in this town.
Exactly. I agree with all that. I saw that feedback. And the first thing that popped in my head, though, was Bethany and Rehoboth both have nice public parking lots that are fairly substantial. And we really don't have that. And that it kind of changes the dynamics, but we're more of a walking town, certainly than Bethany is by far. And I think we're a little bit more of a walking town than Rehoboth is as well, So, and does each restaurant have to solve that parking problem? The fact that we don't have public parking lots, I don't know that it's really their individual burden to try to solve that problem for us, So I like your points that you guys are making, that they should be able to have multiple options, to choose from. But I didn't want to send it over there with no guidance whatsoever. It's kind of my thought process.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. I mean, Dewey Beach is a walking town, walking and or scooters. Or bicycles, sometimes skateboards. I think that when the code was written, it solved some issues they had at that point in time. But I agree that we should motion or send this to planning and zoning. So I'd ask for you have additional comment?
I just said,
Yes, go ahead.
another comment.
Yeah.
Well, first comment is that, I think it's true that we'll never have enough parking in Dewey Beach, no matter what we do. We could tear down a couple of buildings and build parking lots, and we still wouldn't have enough parking. But what I was wondering is, could the town provide planning and zoning with some information about the size of various businesses in the RB2 district? I'm just, and maybe even other business districts as well. I'm just trying to think through the issue of, are there some unintended consequences, or what might they, what might other businesses want to do? Just think through what the implications are of the kind of changes that we make. So I think, if we could get some more information from the town about the size of some of the businesses, who's above that 4,000 square feet threshold. And was that patron, you would suggest a patron? space?
I was keeping it with patron space because that's what we've always done. There are trade-offs with obviously going with gross area versus patron area, I'm not sure I firmly feel on one side or the other, but we've always done patron areas. So I kind of kept it that way.
But again, I would just, hopefully the town can provide some additional information that it might provide.
Particularly for the restaurants.
Yeah, this is just restaurants.
Right now, most people are way
Okay,
And
okay, okay.
but that's based upon what we know of right now. That's not to say somebody else could not come forth and try to build a new restaurant in a new space. So I agree with you.
Combined property.
Right.
For that matter.
I agree.
And should this also be considered that folks could release parking spaces that they've had to have now? If we make a change?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's at least one business I know that's been very held firmly to the standard. And, I'm sure they're going to want to do exactly that.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one more thing along that same vein of unintended consequences, I think the planning commission needs to look pretty hard at why RB2 as opposed to other districts. So we can talk about the nature of RB2. What we need to tie in what we're doing potentially in RB2 to the characteristics of RB2 versus the characteristics of other zoning districts. So there's plenty of support for relaxing the standard here and not there in other places.
So can I make a motion?
Please do.
Okay, so I motion that we refer to planning and zoning to look at chapter 185 zoning as it pertains to restaurant parking requirements. We asked them to look at parking zone RB2, but also understand whether only that zone needs to be changed or other zones need to be looked at as well. And we asked them to look at the option provided by Mr. Mandalis in the public forum previously, as well as the option that I read earlier, as well as any other options they think might be the most effective.
And I second that. And I would also say I'm very happy that we are engaged in this process. I think it's exactly the right way to approach this issue.
Should it also include looking at our neighbors north and south for guidance?
Yeah,
Or do you think?
sure.
That's implied.
Okay.
Good point.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
I'd ask.
Oh, was there a second?
There was, I think it was a second. And
I
it-
second.
it all,
With the additional.
yes, additional comments. So that is also passed unanimously. I'd ask that when that go to planning and zoning, obviously that has public comment at planning and zoning. And then when it comes public hearing, and then when it comes back here, we'll also have a public hearing. That's just for everyone to know. So we don't have multiple public hearings back here. All right, that concludes number 6 on the agenda. Number 7, discuss and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend chapter 71 building construction by adding section 71.5-C to state any new construction demolition disturbing the land area shall utilize erosion control measures as directed by the building official. Commissioner Jazinski,
Yeah, so I got a lot on this agenda.
this is you're the November.
Kind of
You're
finished
the
on my
November.
part. So yeah, this is mine. So I brought this up for 2 primary reasons. One is we're starting to do a lot of work on our storm drains, and those things get clogged by sediment and stuff, and construction runoff is known to be one of those things. But also a lot of these storm drains, enter into the bay, and that causes problems as well as just the ecology of the bay. Plus we have the lakes on the north end. I think we're kind of unusual in that we don't really have any of our own requirements for erosion control when you do a large construction project. So I met with Dawn and I looked at what, Rehoboth does, and I looked at what Bethany does. And Dawn, if you want to come up and talk about this, that's fine too. And what I saw was just these, huge requirements and pages and pages of stuff. And we're always talking about wanting to simplify our zoning thing. And all Sussex County requires, which you have to follow under, is if it's 5,000 square feet of land disturbance or more, then you have to have an erosion control. Well, that basically means on a single family lot, you're going to be just under that clip level and you wouldn't be doing any erosion control in single family. So Dawn and I talked, and we decided that the easiest thing to do was just let her use her good old fashioned common sense and tell people what they need to do. So I don't know, Dawn, if you wanted to add anything to that, or.
All right.
Well,
Yes.
thank you very much. Open discussion among the commissioners.
I don't have any discussion on it. I'll motion or.
I'm amazed we didn't have this before, so
Okay.
if you make motion, I will second it.
Motion.
No conversation. Do I hear a second for the motion? And to a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay, item number 8. Discuss chapter 93 fees, 93-5 parking permits A1 regarding the number of discounted seasonal parking permits allowed per property. Not sure who brought this up.
I can bring it up.
Yeah, once.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So doing some research from our administrative team, it was discovered that property owners and not by the actual property is allowed for the discounted parking rates under 93-5A1, where it says Dewey Beach property owners and business owners with business physically located in Dewey Beach are eligible to purchase up to 2 discounted seasonal parking permits. So if you have 5 people that own a business, each one of those individuals would get 2 discounted parking. If you have 5 people that own residents, the same thing. I think there's an opportunity here for us to go back and just say it should be based on the property and not the property owners. And it should be 2 limited to the property and 2 limited to the business. That's why I brought this up for discussion.
Okay. Open up to the commissioners. Mr. Dides, did you want to make a comment? Oh, okay. Open up to commissioners for discussion. Commissioner Persinger.
Makes sense for me. To me, I had never read it that way, honestly.
Yeah.
Kate brought this up. She brought it to my attention. So, I mean,
Okay.
So I guess my only question is, does this affect the businesses that do multiple employee parking permits over and above 2 then? It doesn't?
Right.
Okay, there's a different discount level for them.
this
Okay.
is at $150.
Okay, all right.
So if I understand, this current situation right now is if you have 5 co-owners of a property, each of those 5 people are entitled to potentially 2 discounted. Okay.
Some people do know it, some people don't.
So for example, like the surf club could buy 200 discounted parking permits.
So if we were to, if my understanding, is there a proposal for an amendment to 93-5A1 to read?
It
Is
was
there-
just, well, I'm sorry.
No,
It was just for discussion. I wanted you to be aware that then it was up to the commissioners how they wanted to move forward.
I think it makes sense to tie it to the property.
I
So
concur.
if there was a motion to amend 93-5A1 to say for each Dewey Beach property and business. No?
I think it could be Dewey Beach property owners and business owners with a business physically located in Dewey Beach are eligible to purchase up to 2 discounted seasonal parking permits per property or business at $150 per permit.
Ms. Sanders, is there any issue with that?
It'll just have to come back in ordinance form.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, well, let's do that.
So it'll be on a future agenda.
So a future agenda, so now that we understand, we'll bring that ordinance to the December meeting. Okay. All right, with that matter, so that motion to table that to the next.
I move that we table it to the next meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Lots of tabling going on. We're gonna have more agendas items for December. Number 9, discuss October 2021 financials.
Financials for October are pretty good. The revenue expected in October was $548,617. Actual revenue was $1,407,016. Difference above expected by $858,399 due to the state 5G funds, transfer tax, and accommodation, hotel tax. And that $375,000 that came in for 5G is part of that. Sheena said we weren't able, we are carrying it separate, but when you look at what came in October, it's counted in coming into the town for October. And that's also with the transfer tax accommodation and the hotel tax. Hotel tax is doing extremely well. Expenses expected for October were 259,763. Actual expenses was 311,679, above by 51,916. Part of that was the project that we paid for on the Center Island project. Also the annual subscriptions to Edmunds, the modules, and the reclassification of our insurance premiums, where we went from 75,000 up to 100,000. We increased the 25,000. So that was all taken out during that period, and that's why we were above by 51,916. Year-to-date expected set-asides, 135,530. Actual year-to-date set-asides, 301,924. Year-to-date difference expected, 78,754. Actual year-to-date difference is 1,728,265.
Okay.
Do it well.
Yeah, I've, again,
Well,
Mr.
I have some
President.
comments.
Yeah. You can go first.
Yeah, just try to make this quick. The financials clearly are strong. We've got probably 30% more than we budgeted for transfer tax. Now, we still have 5 months to go. We've got more than double the annual budget that we put in there for the hotel tax. That's going extremely well. And already we've got 20% more than we budgeted for the accommodations tax. So, things are clearly going well. And as you pointed out, we've got some unusual one-time revenues in there, about $500,000 in that revenue stream. American Rescue Act funds, the state money for moving 5G poles, and there's some COVID reimbursement money in there too, although that's a fairly small amount. But my major point here is that, the town manager is going to come to us at some point and say, we want to spend more money on this. And, to the extent that this is a part of the ongoing costs in supporting the town, I would hope that the request comes to us in a way that it is clear how the increased spending will be supported by ongoing sustainable revenue sources. We've got this money coming in from various sources that we didn't expect. It becomes very difficult to actually assess how we're doing with respect to our budget. So, we really need to take a very hard look at what those sustainable revenue sources are. And, when you come back to us, as I know you're going to, with requests for salary increases particularly, which is obviously very important to supporting the needs of the town. We need to make sure that we've got ongoing sustainable revenues to be able to pay for those and support those over the long term. And just two other things. It's still frustrating to me that we're not identifying and highlighting expenditures from some of the assigned accounts like infrastructure and even that we have this new telecommunications account. We're going to have a capital improvement budget. We need to have a way of being able to identify and highlighting those so we understand those and we can see how those debits are coming out of the various account totals, and just needs to be more clearly tracked. I'd also like to update the estimate for the hotel tax. That I've been very surprised, based on the data that we had initially. I thought $100,000 was a reasonable figure. We're already more than double that. So I would offer some help and, would like to ask a few questions about that, because I think that's going to be an important source of revenue. We are devoting half of that to our capital improvement fund. So I'd like to have a better handle on how much we could expect from that, particularly since we increased the rate by 0.5% beginning January. Is that when that begins?
April 1st. April 1st.
Because again, it's going to be important. So I'm offering some help in doing that, and I will get back to you with some questions.
Right.
That's all I had.
Great. Any comments from any other commissioners concerning the town financials? All right. So I have a few things. One is, we will, it's a process that I think we've gotten better, but we're going to continue to get better in terms of the financial presentations and how things are put forth. I'd ask that each of the commissioners look at the documents as they've been prepared and comment as how to change, or if you want to send that to me as part of as the liaison to budget and finance, I'd appreciate it. For example, while we did receive the financial summary and financial summary 2, to me, it's duplicative. And I only look at the financial summary 2 because it has all the information. So I don't think the town needs to spend time working necessarily on reporting that they don't need. But to Gary's, well, before I get to Gary's, Commissioner Persinger's point, to me, the 375,000 that we have for the wireless is they're potentially moving of the poles, excuse me, is unearned revenue and not necessarily revenue. So it should be considered on the liability until we use those funds for the potential. So it should not be part of our income. In regards to the various, as I reviewed the financials, I too looked at certain things, and I understand we're limited. We have limited amount of people, limited amount of time in terms of in town hall, and everybody does a great job. With what I almost like to see is almost offsetting accounts, and what I mean by that is when I see that there's a $47,000 in expense towards beautification, like I'd like to see them right underneath each other, so I know that where there's matching. Let me just go back up to my top here as an example, and I promise it won't be too long. But when I look at the transfer tax recoup of 63,000, I think that shouldn't be there. I mean, it should also, it's more of a fund issue. To Gary's point, I looked at the transfer tax. I am concerned the future. We're sitting here at just over $1 million for this year, which was unpredictable. If we can estimate the transfer tax in future, for example, if it was only 25 million per year, that's 300 goes to 375. So it's a significant decrease into the influx of funds. If I offset that with the accommodation tax, if there was an increase to the accommodation tax, there needs to be that level of planning. Again, going to the residents saying, if we're going to lose the 700 potentially at risk because of less properties being sold, it can come from an increase in accommodation. It will potentially come from the increase in the hotel tax, but we just need to be, thinking about that in the future, and asking our committees to take a deeper look. When I look at like the COVID-19 revenue, again, what are those? To me, there should be expenses going against that, and that not part of the general operating budget. So that, and we can look at those from a detailed perspective. And to Gary's point, for example, the 9,166 into the 5G cell tower expense, that should have gone not necessarily in our general operating budget, but part of that 40,000, I believe, that we had line. So what I'm recommending is that we, and I'll work if it's okay with the commissioners, that the reporting that we'll have will not just be on the general operations, but will show changes in each of the fund balance. So you have the beginning and understand what those changes are rolling forward. So we'll be able to look at that, and I'll work with, if you don't mind, I'll work with town hall on that. That's all I have.
Yeah, got good points.
All right. Number 10, town manager's comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So some of these we've already discussed, and I already had some pictures taken. You can see the flood that took place that Commissioner Persinger talked about. And then also want to talk about the projects around town. We've talked about those. The painting is done. It's completed. And then our team going out the next day, cleaning up, starting at 3 in the morning, getting the pumps running down there on Bayard Avenue, and then starting to clean the streets. They did an outstanding job. You can see the flooding down there. That's water coming over the bay, over the berm there, going across into the Bayard, and the pumps just couldn't keep up. So at that point, the pumps either automatically shut down or we shut them down until that's, and then we turn them back on. Continue, just go through this as I go through the rest of this. Work on Van Dyke Street on the Bay side is started by DVE. I'm glad that they started it, but they still haven't gotten a building permit for that work that they're doing. Dawn, who was here, is working very hard to try to get that permit so they can continue that work. Right now, I emailed them and told them they are to stop work until they get the building permit down there. They're replacing the storm drains that are there on the Bay side. Working on an RFP for the garbage with Ashley right now. We don't need an RFP for the police computer website that we're looking at, but we are getting another estimate for design. Lifeguard patrol at night. Not talking about the recreation that they run at night. They run that recreation till dark, but then they were patrolling on one of their vehicles back and forth at night. I've talked to the lieutenant about it and the chief. I really think that's something that the lifeguards, once they're done doing their rec at night, they're done. I think really the patrolling of the beach at night, for either alcohol enforcement, the bonfire should really be done by our code enforcement, by the police, and not by the lifeguards. So I'll be making that change unless there's any discussion about that. Also, both Rehoboth and Bethany Beach start their lifeguards officially on Memorial Day weekend on Saturday. Dewey Beach, for some reason, has started on May 15th consistently. And what happens is Todd brings out probably 5 to 6 lifeguards, and then he uses some of them in roaming patrols starting on May 15th. I'd like to back us up and be in line with our other 2 towns on either side of us. And we go from Memorial Day to September 15th. I open that up if I need to actually have this on an agenda for the 17th, I'll put it on the agenda for discussion. But I really think we need to line up at that point. It doesn't mean that the beach patrol is not going to come in and prepare and get everything up and running, get the lifeguard chairs ready, Todd getting all his equipment ready, making sure the machines are all right. It just means that we're not going to be responsible for lifeguarding the beach starting May 15th with a very substandard team at that time, even though they're on 4-wheelers.
Yeah. So, for what it's worth, I think it's a good idea. I mean, let's face it, you can't really swim in May, it's the lifeguards are really just kind of patrolling beach activity more than anything else. To me, it's a good idea, and it's not governed by ordinance, so I think you can administratively just do what you want.
I just wanted to I wanted to ask before I make sure I get some feedback from the commissioner.
I would imagine, Bill, that that probably got into the normal operations because most of the rentals are May 15th through September 15th. But I don't think there's any issue with potential change. And obviously I guess there'd be a change to the budget potentially for.
Some of that money saved there will be used for emergency medical response training that Captain Fritchman does at night. Usually costs us anywhere between $7,000 and $10,000 to run those people through that. We have to bring an instructor in for the fire school. Yeah, so we did an air quality test with environmental compliance on the code enforcement office. Rates were a little high for the air quality inside. They've given me mitigation methods that I'm going to need to do in there, bringing in Surf Pro, having them clean the code enforcement office, bring what they call an air scrubber in there, and then somehow get some more circulation into that building. So I am going to be addressing that. I've sent the results of that test to the judge, to the bailiff, and to the code enforcement team. Just want to let you know that I'm addressing that. Holiday bonuses. I remember watching last year, preparing for this job, watching Jim Didi's talk about the holiday bonuses. They're $250 each. There's 28 employees that are on the list, and we already budgeted for it. Looking at maybe making a change with the bonfires on the beach and how we do it. Currently, you come in, you give your deposit, you pay if you live here. If you don't live here, it's $30, and one's $50. And at the sheet that we have, it says at the very top, it's bold and it's in yellow. It says you have 2 weeks to come back and get your $100 back. If not, you lose it. We get a lot of people that come in and say, well, I didn't know that. Well, not only do it's on the form that they actually sign, but we also give them a handout. And in the handout, it also describes that. So we're looking at a different method to where we maybe can capture the money, hold it like you do on a hotel. And then when the lifeguards or whoever goes down the beach and says, there's no issue there, we just release it. Okay. So we are looking at that. And the other thing we look at is maybe just opening up the vendors, depending on how folks actually are cleaning up the beach as we move forward. Some of the beaches are moving towards just having vendors do them. So that's something we'll also be looking at, but nothing yet. I've also, Jim Didi's and I have talked to Dewey Beach Enterprises down at the Hyatt. We've given them an extension till December 27th on some of their space. And we've told them that the town manager will no longer give any more extensions for that space down there. I've emailed both their attorneys and told them they need to come before the commissioners before or on December 17th if they want another extension for the area they're using down there for event space instead of retail. I mean, we've been pushing this down the road long enough. They need to come to us with a decision on how they want to handle it. Okay. Sip and Shop is the 26th, 27th, and 28th of this month. That'll be on Dagsworthy Street on the Bay side. We just got in our limited edition dog tags for Christmas. They'll be for sale for $50. We sold out of ours this summer within 3.5-4 weeks. Installed some steps out here so you could get out into the parking lot. And then there was a shower out here on the side. We went ahead, we put a actual a booth around it, and we put cedar shingles so it matches the building. So now, instead of going into the captain's office to take a shower, the folks can go right outside and take a shower. Pending any questions, that's all I have for now.
So what are these?
So these are challenge coins. So
I'm
They-
so excited. I'm beyond excited.
So they're very good for morale from a law performance point of view. And I don't know if the lieutenant wants to go into it a little more, and also from military. And then when you're out and about and you're with somebody else, you give it to them. And it's sometimes if they have a coin, they give it back. They give it back to you. I don't know, LT, do you have any comments?
It's basically like a trading thing for our profession. You know, a lot of people collect patches. Now people are getting away from trading the patches, which we have on our uniforms, and now they're going to challenge coins. It's just something a little bit neater. You know, you can keep them, you know, store them in a book for keepsakes, basically.
Neat, very neat.
I do have one more thing. So if you look at our stats for the month, our law enforcement stats, we are above in every category with enforcement from our police department. They continue to do an outstanding job across the board, from traffic to criminal arrests into investigations. You have anything else to add, Lieutenant, on that?
Well, I mean, it means good and bad. It's good and bad. I mean, the guys and girls are out there doing their job, but at the same time, you know, people are acting up. I mean, even if you look down at the vehicle accidents, you know, we're up to 92. In 2019, we were at 71. Last year during COVID, we were at 51. All right, we're up to 92 accidents. So, I don't. Hopefully, it's not a sign of the times. Hopefully, it goes down next year.
At least they'll occur at a slower speed now.
Correct.
Well, yeah, that's, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, there's numerous people have come to me in town and been very thankful that we've, as a group, have reduced the speed limit. I'd also ask that we, if it's all possible, to police it to a certain degree, because I come in town at 25 because I don't want to be the guy to actually get a ticket in his own town. And there are a lot of people who are very angry behind me. So I just think that we need to, I'm saying enforce it, but I think that the public needs to know that we're serious about the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Okay. Anything else from town's perspective?
Anything else before we go to executive?
Well, no.
Well, before that, commissioner comments. Commissioner Bauer.
Well, everything's running well. I mean, it looks like revenue's going well. Expenses are staying down. Police are doing a great job. Administration's doing a great job. So we just owe all of you a big thank you.
Commissioner Gibbons.
I have gotten, as the mayor has, a number of questions about why did you move the speed limit down to 25? And when I explain, everybody is thrilled. And yeah, we need to pull my husband over and give him a ticket because he does not listen. And yes, that can go in the minutes. I wanted to publicly thank our town manager and the team that pulled together for the pre-Halloween storm. I was in Washington worrying about what was going on here, and I felt informed, and the town was kept safe. And I wanted to publicly say thank you.
Police department did the heavy load.
I said the team you pulled together.
Commissioner Jasinski.
I just wanted to acknowledge a great job that Mayor Stevens is doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I neglected to thank Sheena for all the work that she did on the employee manual. I know she put a lot of time and effort into that. And, I neglected to say that during the discussion. So yeah, I just want to thank her for that.
Okay. I have just a few line items before we move to convene the executive session. Just as a reminder that, and Ashley has posted and I believe it's on the website, Adopt a Family 2021. I'd encourage all of us who feel gratitude and fortunate to be here to realize that there are a lot of people that aren't. So give if you can. That's the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to point out is that I believe we have the tree lighting happening on December 4th at the Bay Walk at 6:30.
Correct.
There's, positives and negatives. One positive is that for all of you, I don't know if you know this, but one of our residents, specifically in my community, Bonnie McCarthy turned 101 and wanted to thank Ellen Driscoll, who ran a great story from the Gazette. She's 101. She acts 75. I mean, it's unbelievable how healthy this woman is. And also acknowledge the passing of our former governor, Ruth Ann Minner, first and only woman to ever be the governor in the state of Delaware these past few weeks. And I'll close this part of the meeting with a little bit of education. I try to, I try to tell people whenever whenever it's happy hour and I start thinking about it, and it's understanding the names or several of the names of the streets that we have here in Dewey Beach. Specifically McKinley, Reed, Rodney, Dickinson, Van Dyke, Collins, Clayton, and Salisbury. They were all governors of the state of Delaware. So something to think about as we have other people like Ruth Ann who passed and possibly a future street name. So just a thought process. That's all I have. With that, can we close this meeting?
Motion.
Or
So you can move to go into executive session.
motion to move to go into executive session?
The reasons, actually, I think you read it earlier, but.
Yeah, I can do that. A motion, we are going to convene to go into executive session pursuant to 29 Del Code Section 10004B2. The town commissioners will be meeting in executive session to have preliminary discussions on the site acquisition for any publicly funded capital improvements or sale lease of real property. And also pursuant to the same section 29 Del C 10004B9, the town commissioners will be meeting in executive session to discuss personnel matters. With that, motion to go into executive session.
Motion to exactly what you just said.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.